Happy Monday, everyone. This is Martha with Nature Niche, and for the next few weeks, I want to focus on some rare Michigan wetland ecosystems, uh, help get you out in some of these neat wetlands that I got to see with Michigan Wetlands Association this summer as part of their Rare Wetland Educational Series. So this week, I'm going to talk about Prairie Fen, and we got to see this at Fort Custer property, not some place you would normally have access to, roughly between Battle Creek and the Kalamazoo area. So Prairie Fen is the focus for today, and the key characteristics, you can think of our landscape ecosystems as having key characteristics just like you would a plant for telling it apart from others. So for Prairie Fen, it is a wetland dominated by sedges, grasses, and other graminoids, and it has graminoids and forbs that are typical of prairie ecosystems. It also has cold, calcareous, groundwater-fed springs that come to the surface, and the soils are organic, so they are peatlands, and they're moderately alkaline and often have marl deposits either subsurface or at the surface. And prairie fens occur south of the climatic tension zone in southern lower Michigan. As far as ranking is concerned, Prairie Fen is a rare and imperiled wetland. It ranks globally as a G3 and in the state of Michigan as a S3, meaning that it's rare or uncommon in the state, and that under Part 303 of NREPA and Michigan's wetland laws, this type of wetland is regulated no matter the size, and if impacts are necessary and you try to be able to impact this type of wetland, mitigation will be required at a higher ratio of 5 acres of mitigation to 1 acre of impact. So it's best to avoid and protect these rare wetlands. As far as the broad landscape context goes, Prairie Fen differs from Northern Fen in that it is south rather than north of that climatic tension zone, and they are more interior than coastal fens, which occur along the shorelines of the Great Lakes. Prairie fens tend to occur in the landscape in the glacial interlobate region of Michigan's southern lower peninsula. So this is where the lobes of the glaciers came into close contact, and you have broad outwash plains with the meltwater rushing off of the glaciers, and then you get these islands of coarse textured end and ground moraine that got pushed up under the weight of the big sheets of ice and ice contact ridges where there were streams flowing through the glaciers. So prairie fens tend to happen right along the border or junction of where the outwash plains that are flatter meet the higher relief of the moraine and ice contact ridges. So they tend to be on lower slopes of these features, where you have coarse textured glacial deposits that have a high hydraulic conductivity and force groundwater out onto the surface of the ground. And prairie fens often drain into other water features like small lakes, headwater streams, and rivers. And peat is the typical substrate of a prairie fen, often sapric peat, so the most decomposed, also known as muck. It can be a foot to more than 36 feet deep, and that is caused by the groundwater creating constantly saturated conditions which limits aerobic bacteria from breaking down or decomposing the plant material, so that it's a very slow process that organic matter builds up in the form of peat. The groundwater is calcareous, which means that it's rich in calcium and magnesium bicarbonate because it's flowing through either limestone bedrock or coarse textured calcareous glacial deposits. And the high concentrations of bicarbonates often precipitate out in the form of like a blue-gray, sometimes whitish gray substance known as marl. And that can be below the peat or even exposed at the ground surface. As far as natural processes go, the hydrological processes in a prairie fen are really what shape the vegetative structure in different zones. The saturated peat is maintained by that constant inflow of cold groundwater rich in calcium and magnesium, and that groundwater wells up through the peat and can form broad seeps or local springs, and the water keeps moving through the prairie fen and through the peat, either through diffuse surface flow or it can form into little rivulets, little stream flow. Fire was another very important natural process to shape prairie fens, especially pre-European settlement. The dry, open upland communities, often dominated by oak barrens and white oak savannas, those were burned either with Native American set or lightning strike fires, and it would spread into the adjacent prairie fen, burning surface vegetation, inhibiting shrub invasion and other woody plant establishment, and maintaining the open prairie fen vegetation structure. Today, with fire suppression across most of the landscape, the vegetation structure of prairie fens is largely held open through the unique hydrology, those saturated soils from the groundwater flow. So you'll get a mix of obligate wetland plants and calciphiles, plants that like calcareous or basic conditions. In Michigan, the key indicator plant species for prairie fen include tamarack, poison sumac, grass of Parnassus, shrubby cinquefoil, Virginia mountain mint, Ohio goldenrod and Rydell's goldenrod, and Indian grass. Usually there are 3 to 4 different vegetation zones within a prairie fen. First is the wooded fen zone, which is dominated by trees and shrubs, usually around the upland edge of the prairie fen. So higher in topography to slightly sloping surfaces, basically where upland is grading into wetland. And that's where you'll see the tamarack. But you can also see other wetland tree species like red maple and American elm, and lots of shrub diversity, things like red osier dogwood, gray dogwood, ninebark, alderleaf buckthorn. We actually have a native buckthorn, Rhamnus alnifolia, that can be found in prairie fens. Different willow species, and meadowsweet and poison sumac, as well as the shrubby cinquefoil, those indicator species. Then next in the landscape, kind of along that slope, is the largest and most diverse vegetative zone, the sedge meadow zone. And this has saturated soils. It can still be slightly sloping with stable peat, and you can get different groups or associations of plants, including sedge shrub mixes. So you get sedges and low-growing shrubs like the shrubby cinquefoil, sedge species like Carex stricta and Carex aquatilis. You can have a sedge composite association. So that's usually dominated by Carex stricta, and then you'll get Joe pieweed and common boneset, asters, species like Rudbeckia hirta, black-eyed Susan, Ohio goldenrod, and marsh fern, Dilipteris palustris. And then the Grass Sedge Association, where you have a bunch of different sedge species, Carex stricta, sterilis, aquatilis. You can get little blue stem and big blue stem and Indian grass all mixed in. Lowest position in the landscape, there might be inundated flats or a depressional area around the lake or stream feature that the prairie fen is draining into, and that can have up to about a foot of water standing in the spring and early summer, and so you get the wettest species like hardstem bulrush, three square, twig rush, different juncus species, rush species, and spike rush species in the genus Eleocharis, as well as broadleaf cattail and common arrowhead. Fourth zone are marl flats, and these occur where you get a very calcareous groundwater seepage and the marl precipitating out at the surface. And these tend to be more sparsely vegetated, and you get some serious calciphiles in there like Carex flava, bog lobelia, grass of Parnassus, Ringcospora alba, which is beak rush, and bog arrowgrass. So some unique things, as well as carnivorous plants like roundleaf sundew, pitcher plant, and flatleaf bladderwort. A great place to get familiar with the vegetation of our different landscape ecosystems is Michigan Natural Features Inventory's Natural Communities. So here's the Prairie Fen site. I'll drop a link in the description for this post. They also have even more thorough natural community abstracts, which you can get to there. But this is a great place to, if you couldn't keep up with all of the plant names I just rattled off in the Latin, here's where you can look to find the graminoid species, find the wildflowers in Prairie Fen, some of the things you're most likely to encounter in this particular rare wetland ecosystem. They also cover rare plants and animals, so prairie fens are super important as habitat for our rare flora and fauna. Some noteworthy animal species include federally and state-listed Mitchell satyr butterfly and Pauschik skipperling. Some of our rare turtles like Blanding's turtle, eastern box turtle, and spotted turtle, and some of our rare snakes like Kirtland snake and federally and state-listed eastern Massasauga rattlesnake, and rare plants including purple milkweed and white lady's slipper, shooting star, rattlesnake master, queen of the prairie, Jacob's ladder, prairie dropseed, just to name a few. So as far as conservation and management of this particular landscape ecosystem goes, protecting its hydrology is most important to keep the vegetation structure and those rare plant and animal species alive. So agriculture and residential drains and wells impact groundwater flow into our prairie fens, groundwater extraction, altering the landscape so that recharge isn't happening. The surface water is drained away and it's not going down into the groundwater table. That's a problem. And so the most important thing we can do is protect the aquifer recharge area surrounding the prairie fen, so the surrounding uplands, to retain this ecosystem's unique hydrology. So we have to have healthy woodlands, savanna, and prairies in the uplands adjacent to prairie fens to allow for infiltration of precipitation back into that groundwater table. So things like lawns and agricultural fields and impervious surfaces really only contribute warm, nutrient, and sediment-laden surface water runoff into the fens, which can be harmful in their own way. Nutrient additions from leaking septic tanks and drainage fields are believed to change the dominance or predominance of invasive species, things like narrow-leaf cattail and common reed or Phragmites australis, and purple loosestrife, and their ability to invade our prairie fens. So another really significant invasive species concern with prairie fens is glossy buckthorn, Frangula alnus. That's another woody invasive species that can change nutrient cycling, change hydrology, and really need to be controlled in this particular type of ecosystem. Another thing we can do is really help control invasive species and just in general native and non-native woody invasive or woody species invasion into the more open portions of prairie fens. So that can be done with the use of prescribed fire and manual removal of those trees and shrubs to help keep the vegetation open and vegetation diversity high. And just to put another plug in for the importance of keeping the connectivity between our healthy uplands and our healthy wetlands, here are a couple of blue racer snakes that we found sunning themselves in the uplands directly adjacent to the prairie fen we were visiting at Fort Custer. So our wildlife species move in and out of these ecosystems, and it's not just a hydrologic connection between the two, but a biological one. And so it's really important to keep that interface between upland and wetland ecosystems healthy and intact. I hope that you've enjoyed this adventure into a prairie fen ecosystem. And I just wanted to say a special thank you to the Michigan Wetlands Association, Eagle, MNFI, and Fort Custer staff who made this particular rare species training so memorable. Take care and have a good week.